How many Sundays a year are you leading worship?
It just varies. Well, before this year was very different because now, with doing the album, now we're kind of building the next phase of what's happening with Gateway Music, now what's happening with me. But normal worship, any worship pastor serving 2 to 3 times a month, And if you're a campus worship pastor, for me, I worked more in the central office, is where I work. So I'm not in a physical campus. I'm in the office that supports them. And so I'll come into the campus to help and support and lead. So my rotation is a little bit different. But even more so now because with the launch of the album and the music.
So are you kind of the guy over all the other worship pastors?
Okay, so not now. Like I used to be on a team, and the way the structure is, you have Pastor David Thompson. He's like the executive worship pastor.
Okay.
And then you have a lead team, and there's different aspects of of the functionality of different aspects of the church in worship. You got production, you've got artistry, you've got songwriting, you've got administration. So before this year, I was the worship pastor of administration. And so I would meet with all the campus worship pastors, twice a month, work through resourcing them and supporting them, and go visit the campuses, help with campus launches, all those different type of things. And I just kind of ran a team that did all those things, from PCO to all the different things that every worship pastor in the country has to do at a larger scale. So that was what my role was. And so that's
it doesn't sound very creative. When you describe it like that, it doesn't sound
it's
like
not.
it's not.
Okay. It's not. That role, that's like, and really, honestly, man, like I talked to so many people about like being a worship pastor in a mega church, and a lot of folks are like, well, what do you guys do all day? Like, it's like, man, it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
And because at the end of the day, it's about managing people.
Yep.
And the larger you get, the more people there's to manage, more programs to manage.
Yes.
And then the more intentional you have to be about all the decisions you're making.
Right.
And then you've got more resources at play. You've got more partners at play. You've got more systems to manage. And sometimes you're working on the systems that you created to manage the people. So all those things, that's the life of a church. And as it scales, those things become more challenging, right? Sometimes the system breaks down because you get to a crucial mass of growth and it doesn't work anymore. So you have to find something new and pivot. And so you need leadership.
How many people were you overseeing total?
So
in your previous
in
role?
my previous role, I had a small staff of 5 people.
Okay.
And we kind of operated in the office there, but we oversaw and supported 10 campuses. So we got 9 campuses in DFW, 1 in Jackson Hole. And so, we were meeting and supporting them, and each campus, and the campuses aren't like massive staff, it's just, but you have, some very necessary things that need to be done. You got your campus worship pastor, you have your youth, or we call next gen worship pastor, and all the different, folks involved in that. So just supporting them, there's a lot of work that's going into that.
Sounds like a behemoth of an operation.
You know what I think it is? There's no job worthwhile that's not challenging. Like this, at the end of the day, you're solving problems all the time, and that's what a job is.
Amen.
That's what ministry is all about. It's helping to solve problems in real time, and that's a loving thing for people. And I think, whether it be the staff or the parishioners, how we care for them, and then you still have some of the elements of it's not just administration, it's not just practicing and doing music. Some of it is discipleship. It's meeting with people weekly, taking people to coffee, hearing, what's going on in their lives and helping support them personally in their trajectory and their discipleship journey and all the things they're going through, and helping them with that as well.
Wow. So when someone hears that and their response is, man, that just sounds too big as an operation. The megachurch sounds crazy. Like, is this the way Jesus intended it? This sounds more like a business than a ministry. How would you respond to that, having been in an ecosystem? Before we go into kind of how your role has changed,
for sure.
How would your response be to that?
I would say, whether you're talking about Moses and the children of Israel and the great advice from his father-in-law Jethro of separating them and coming up with a system to manage millions of people. This is a biblical principle. There's always been masses of people to be managed and to be supported. You got that. You can go to the early church and the apostles saying, okay, let's find some deacons and some folks to handle the issues going on amongst people. There was some issues with, injustice and all those type of things like that. Well, we have to preach the word. Someone else has to handle the business. So let's go find men of good reputation, husbands of one wife and all those things. And I want them to handle those things daily. And that's not Bible class. That's handling life. It's handling business. People have bills that they can't pay, issues, kids are sick, different things are going on. And that's just a matter of administration. That's a biblical thing. And even if you look at the miracle of the 5,000, right, which is 5,000 plus, really, it's Jesus administrates that. Okay, we're going to get this. God's going to do the impossible, right? We bless this food and God multiplies it. But I want you guys to administrate this. I want you to take this food out. I want you to serve everyone. And then I want you to collect everything. And was that difficult? I'm sure it was a lot of work. And you got 12 guys serving thousands of people, right? And so administration and masses of people is not an issue. It's not a problem. It's very biblical and very normal. I think what we end up critiquing or criticizing is when there are people who are abusing that for their own gain. For these are the hirelings that get into the midst of it, the wolves, right? Amidst sheep. And so I think, and that's fair. We should critique that. We should criticize that, and we should hold those people accountable. But that does not make healthy ministry dysfunctional or crazy or wrong. I think it's highly spiritual, highly biblical. And I believe it fulfills the heart of God. You look at the world, there are nearly 8 billion people here. That's a lot of people to serve. And here's what people don't understand. You cannot start enough churches to serve all the people that need a church.
That's good.
So if you, honestly, we don't, the issue, we have more churches closing than we have churches opening. That's the issue we've got. So we really need more pastors, more leaders, and more people that would fulfill the mission of Jesus and preaching the gospel and calling people to repentance. That's what we really need.
Hey, this is a brand new shirt from our He is Him collection. Who is Him? Jesus is Him. Jesus is God. Jesus is the Savior. Jesus is King. He died and rose so we could be in right standing with God. And when we put this shirt on in the morning, it reminds us of just that and helps us make a statement to the rest of the world. So go to blessgod.shop and pick up yours today. Only available this Friday through Sunday only. Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a paradigm that some Christians hold that if something is big, it's bad.
Absolutely.
And I don't think that's helpful. I think the legitimate question would be twofold. One, are these systems set up in a way where abuse is allowed or created if you get the wrong type of narcissistic leader involved, and they can kind of exploit the system? And two, in the system, how many people are getting discipled, right? Like how many people are getting discipled? And so if it's a system where you're describing, hey, I meet with people, disciple people, and then those people go out and disciple people, and then there's a system of people discipling disciples to disciple, right?
Yeah.
I say that's a massive W, and then doing it at scale. I just think most people don't understand that and how that could be in a healthy function, because our brains naturally go towards the bad.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? So for every Hillsong, there's probably 20 gateways.
Absolutely.
Right? but we see the Hillsong and we go, big church bad.
Yeah.
Because we also have the preconceived notion that big is bad, right? Instead of going, well, our brains go to the horrible stories and that those stand out more versus all the pastors that are faithfully serving, scandal-free.
Yeah.
Like I've had Pastor Greg Laurie on, and I had the privilege of going and speaking at their young adults ministry. 50 plus years in Jesus, not even a hint of any sort of scandal or right. There's probably way more Greg Lauries out there,
absolutely,
than there are, Brian Houston's or whoever, right? And so I think it's just interesting. But here's the trippy part, and I'm gonna bounce this off. I know I'm kind of all over the place, but just flesh this out. There's people who have an issue with the church having systems and institutions, and they think big is bad. I think that's like brain rot from like Marxism and just all kinds of stuff, right?
Yeah.
And those same people would be okay with the government having big systems and institutions,
absolutely,
and thinking that the government is better at serving people, better at dispersing resource, better at raising your children than the church.
Absolutely.
What do you think about that? I know I just said a whole lot.
You're absolutely right. Because essentially you have a group of people with maybe a political affiliation, left, right, you have that. And, these are the people that, like you said, that certainly like Everyone's going to vote for the same person. The agenda's set, whether you agree or disagree. It's all set for you, and we're totally fine with that. And we fight for that. And I think we do that at the detriment of our children, even for communities that have been, in poverty for decades and decades. They're not getting better, but we're still going to stick. We're going to still ride with this party. We're going to still ride with this position or whatever it might be. All that to say is like, at the end of the day, I think it's the reality that people are opposed to submitting to God. Because there's a level of accountability that goes much further than what the government's going to contend with. Like, so at the end of the day, I think people will find a number of reasons to reject the authority of the Bible and of God, because I think that's very disruptive to our sense of control and what we like to have control over. And the church disrupts that. The church comes with the gospel that says that you have to submit to Jesus, that the way you do things is wrong and the way God says it's right. It's not me imposing my own will on you. It's me preaching the gospel to you that was preached to me. And that means you have to die to yourself. You have to die to the things you do and the things you love, the sins, the things you like doing. You have to let those things go. No one wants to be told that. Like that's something that's challenging to hear, if you're not a Christ follower. So I think that's where you meet, this conflict. And because of that, of course I got a problem with Hillsong. Like even when you see the documentary, and I heard you talk about this, that documentary is not as much about the dysfunctions that may or may not be as it is about someone's presupposition, right? I've already come to this documentary with a presupposition about Christianity and God and the way I think it should really be, and I'm only leveraging this story to preach my agenda and to get my point across.
I mean, people got an axe to grind.
Absolutely.
And here's the truth. We shouldn't be giving them debate. There shouldn't be a Hillsong. Like we should be sorting these things out. We should be more, I'm going to say, critical of bad institutions, right? People, the funny thing to me is people will light up Hillsong and have lit up Hillsong for years, right? But the same people people within the church, they'll give a pass to like quote unquote more doctrinally sound and conservative theological camps. And it's like, y'all are just as goofy. Y'all just as goofy over here talking about a woman can't divorce her husband in the case of abuse. Y'all sound nuts. What are you talking about? Like, no, that's equally as bad. But like we're okay with criticizing the folks that would like Hillsong would be like the more liberal arm of the church, even though they're really what it really means to be liberal or progressive in the context of like the world, they're not. But within the context of the church, they'd be like, oh well, whatever. And so I think we don't have a healthy, just scales of how we engage with these conversations. And most people are going to be more compliant. Like most religious people are going to be more compliant. They're going to be more agreeable. They're not going to be willing to challenge the status quo, right? I mean, there's even psychology of folks who are religious. They say they're more conscientious and they're more agreeable. And then you'll have guys like me that like I'm neither. Like I'm not very conscientious, as you could tell by showing up, and I'm like frazzled, like, oh, what's up, man? I'm in basketball shorts, right? I'm not super conscious, and I'm definitely not agreeable. But I think we need these sorts of conversations, right? And we need folks from the megachurch world, such as yourself, to lean in and say, no, let me give you an apologetic for why we think a 20,000 member congregation is good and why we're adding a net positive, instead of being like, oh, we're not going to talk to people who have a different bent. We're not going to talk to people who are more, they're more skeptical of a megachurch. Like that doesn't serve anybody well. That doesn't make the megachurch industrial system look well, and it doesn't serve the people to have the good conversations.
Hey, this is a brand new shirt from our He is Him collection. Who is Him? Jesus is Him. Jesus is God. Jesus is the Savior. Jesus is King. He died and rose so we could be in right standing with God. And when we put this shirt on in the morning, it reminds us of just that and helps us make a statement to the rest of the world. So go to blessgod.shop and pick up yours today. Only available this Friday through Sunday only.